We'll do a review of Lekutei Sichas in Chelek Yutes, the first sicha for the Parsha of Vayeilech. This sicha, the Rebbe explains the connection of the Parsha with the time that we read it. So, Nitzavim Vayeilech, the Rebbe will discuss first. It seems like they're really one portion, and then they're split into two parts, versus other mechubarim portions that are written, are read sometimes together. They are really two separate ones that sometimes we put them together. In this case, Nitzavim Vayeilech are really one parsha, and then they're split sometimes. But nevertheless, it shows that they're really connected between themselves, and yet there is sometimes that they're separated. And the Rebbe will explain how Nitzavim is always before Rosh Hashanah, Vayeilech is sometimes before Yom Kippur, and the relationship between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is similarly, in some ways, they're connected, and similarly, in some ways, Nitzavim is together with Vayeilech. But in some ways, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are different, and that's when they're separate, as the Rebbe will explain the whole idea inside. Let's look inside. Aleph. Benegeya disedres Nitzavim Vayeilech, as far as the portions of Nitzavim Vayeilech, Zog the Rasag states, and the Sadia Goen in his Siddur, Kriyas HaTorah, he says like this: if you look at the language, you'll see that according to the way he states, it seems like it's one parsha, Nitzavim Vayeilech, and it's split into two. So he says like this: Umehen, and from them, he's talking about the Nun Gilm Parsha Torah. There are 53 portions of the Torah. So from them, Parsha Mischalekes Lishtayim, there is a one portion which is split into two. This is the words of the Rasag. And they'll be read on two Shabbos if there is a need. So you take one parsha and you split to two, and it is read on two Shabbos if there is a need, as we'll see later on when we separate the Nitzavim from Vayeilech. This we're talking about is the Atem Nitzavim, which is split with Vayeilech Moshe. So the Rebbe learns from the Diuk Haloshin, from the specific language, Parsha HaMischalekes Lishtayim, a Parsha that is split into two. And this is not the way, not the language that he uses by the other Mechubarim. Nit verzogt by the andere Sedres HaMischabres. Not the same language that he uses by the other Sedres that connect. Like quoting the previous, he says, Shmoina mehen, there are 8 sedres, mitztarfos liv amim, shtayim biyachad. Okay, sometimes they will be combined together, two portions together. V'nikrois ba'arba shabboses, and they will be read on 4 shabboses versus 8 shabboses. Is muchach, so here it's evident as Nitzavim Vayeilech, that in essence the Nitzavim Vayeilech is one sedra. Nor lipamim zetelt men ir ev zwei. Occasionally you split it into two. Nit v'di andere shmoine sedres hamitzchabres. Not as the other 8 sedres that connect. Was die mitztarfe seinen be'etzem zwei besondere. Those that are combined are in essence 2 separate. Shtayim sedres, there are 2 sedres. Nor lifa'amim leint man beide zusammen in ein Shabbos, but occasionally you read them both on one Shabbos. So that's clearly mashma from the wording of the Rasag that the Nitzavim and Vayeilech, unlike the other Mechubarim, are really one, but it is split. The Rebbe will use this to show that really there's one theme of Nitzavim Vayeilech, and also to show, but then it could be split. Azoy mashma from the Siman. This is also the way it appears from the sign was wird gebracht in Tur v'Shulchan Aruch. In the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, they bring a sign how to know when Nitzavim and Vayeilech are separate. So they use the term of Pas Bag Hamelech. In the Pasuk in Daniel Aleph, in Pasuk Yud Gimel and Pasuk Tezvav. So over there, the Pasuk used the word Pas Bag Hamelech. So how do they translate it? So Bag, the word base Gimel of the Pas Bag, and Hamelech means that the pas is a broken part. A Pasuk Oisepit, Rebel Taich now. Pas Vayeilech, as ven Rosh Hashanah, Hamelech is a Rosh Hashanah, which is Hamelech. So Bag Hamelech, then Pas Vayeilech, then you break Vayeilech. So Hamelech is Chal. B'yem Beis or the B'yem Gimel b'Shavua. So Beis Gimel, it comes on Monday or on Tuesday of the week. Leintman Vayeilech Bazunder. So then you read Vayeilech separately. So when Hamelech is Beis Gimel, Pas, you go ahead and you break into pieces and you put Vayeilech separate. The Magen Avraham types this up as the Magen Avraham types it. What are we breaking off? Pas Vayeilech. We are breaking off and making Vayeilech. Pirush Melushoin Posus Oiso Pitim passes from the language. Break it up by the Mincha. It says you break it up into pieces. Shemechalkim Nitzavim Vayeilech l'shtayim. We split Nitzavim Vayeilech into two. Pas is from Loshin Posus Oiso Pitim. You break it into pieces. Metzebrecht ein chale verokik oif telum. You take one challah, only one rokik cake, the baked cakes from the mincha, oif telum, you put it into portions. Azoy oich pas vayeilech. Pas vayeilech means as me brecht up. You break off. Metelt up vayeilech from itself. And you remove and you separate Vayeilech from itself. So what's all this telling us? What do we learn from all this? As Yeder Sedra hot atoichen kloli. So since every Sedra has a general theme, was mit dem teilt sie sich aus von alle Sedras. With that theme, it's different, distinguished, separate from all other Sedras. Is move on as Nitzavim and Vayeilech haben beide ein teichen kloli. So it's understood that Nitzavim and Vayeilech, they both have one general theme because they're one parsha, so it's one theme. One theme means more than putting two separate pieces together, which also have a combined idea. Das heißt, nicht nur is in Zeifaran a gewisse Nekudim B'Shutafes. Not just that they have some common point in the parshas. That would be if they were two separate parshas and you lay them together. But since they're one parsha, so if it was just because they have a combined idea, that would be the reason, because of their common idea, that you can combine them together. Similar to the way it's by all portions that you connect. But in our case, it's even more than that. That mainly they both have in themselves the same idea, the same concept, the same theme, mainly. And they're one parsha. But yet, we still separate them sometimes, afal pikein, and yet, from them, gufa, from this itself, oslip omim leintman parshas Vayeilech. In Abazunder Shabbos, that sometimes you read the portion of Vayeilech and a separate Shabbos is move on. So it's understood that there's also two parts to that one theme. As zusammen der Miet was beide Sedres haben ein Teuchen. That notwithstanding, together with the fact that these both Sedres have one idea, one theme, is von deswegen, voran achiluk, there is nevertheless a difference with the Inyan Gitzicharois in Yedin with the Tzei Sedros. How this theme represents itself is comes out from each of the Sedros. Nochmer. Not only is it different, Baldas Parshas Vayeilech kumt noch Parshas Nitzavim. The portion of Vayeilech follows the Parshas Nitzavim. Darf man sagen. So we have to say, as in Vayeilech is an ilu in them inyan of Nitzavim, that in Vayeilech there is an advantage over Nitzavim. This an ilu shaloi be'erech till a non-measured elevation, which means infinitely a greater, was the far the midiba verzi gelentli pomen abzuder Shabbos. That's why occasionally it's read on a separate Shabbos. So therefore, the Rebbe says while it's one theme, yet it has expressions in Nitzavim and Vayeilech, and a greater in Vayeilech because it follows Nitzavim. And that's why it's a separate Shabbos. And the Rebbe will bring out now how they both have that same idea as Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and Rosh Hashanah has a general theme together with Yom Kippur, just like in Tzom Vayeilech. There is a common denominator between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, yet we separate them. This is Rosh Hashanah and this is Yom Kippur. And the elevation of Yom Kippur is much greater, and the Rebbe associates that to the Parsha of Nitzom Vayeilech. Base. Parshas Nitzovim Leintman Alamol for Rosh Hashanah. We're always going to read the Nitzovim, the portion of Nitzovim before Rosh Hashanah. With the Alter Rebbe is Mevayer. As the Alter Rebbe explains the Shaykhs from Atem Nitzovim Hayoim Kulchem V'Goymer to Rosh Hashanah, explains the connection from the Atem Nitzovim to Rosh Hashanah will come on Siv Gimel, as later on in Siv Gimel. Mashen came Parshas Vayeilech, as opposed to the portion of Vayeilech, was Be'ez is obgetelt for Parshas Nitzovim, when we do separate it from the portion of Nitzovim, Verzi geleint in Em Shabbos noch Rosh Hashanah, then you read it on the Shabbos after Rosh Hashanah, Far Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur. So Rosh Hashanah is always with the portion of Nitzavim, no matter what. It may have Vayeilech with it or not, but sometimes Vayeilech is separated, and then it's read before Yom Kippur. So this means that Vayeilech from Parshas Vayeilech, as the Teuch from Parshas Vayeilech, that the theme, the idea of the Parshas Vayeilech is Shaykh Euch to Yom Kippur. It also belongs to Yom Kippur, because sometimes you read it before Yom Kippur, not before Rosh Hashanah, when we separate it from the Parshas Nitzavim. Ubemele, and therefore is the biur in the tzvei nekudas hanal benegay to Nitzavim Vayeilech. So therefore, the explanation of the 2 points that we brought out, that on one point there is a common theme, and yet there is a separate theme, and then Vayeilech is higher. So as we explain these 2 points as they relate to Nitzavim Vayeilech, Aleph, as they haben ein Teuchen, first that there is one theme, und beis as zusammen der Mithot Parshas Vayeilech ha'ilui, an ilui and Parshas Nitzavim, and 2 that the notwithstanding the one theme, Vayeilech has an advantage over Parshas Nitzavim. It follows Parshas Nitzavim, and it is greater, therefore, than Parshas Nitzavim. But Zayin verstandig. So how are we going to understand these 2 levels? In the Leut der Hasbara, based on the explanation the Rebbe is going to explain now, as euch in dem Inyan for Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur, that also in the idea of Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, Zayin dod the tzvei nekudas hamuris, there also exist the 2 points between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as they're one, and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as Yom Kippur is higher than Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is ein inyan. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are one idea, one theme. Ein hemshech, the one continuation. Biz as Yom Kippur wird angerufen for Rosh Hashanah. Sometimes even though Yom Kippur is the 10th day, it's referred to, the Pasuk calls it Rosh Hashanah. It's still the beginning of the year. So Yom Kippur is also Rosh Hashanah, even though it's already 10 days into the year. But on the other hand, Yom Kippur has an advantage over Rosh Hashanah. As we say, Rosh Hashanah Yekosevon, and Rosh Hashanah they're written, Ubeyom Tzom Kippur Yechosemon, and the Chasima is on Yom Kippur. As Yom Kippur is the Gemar V'choisem for Rosh Hashanah. The Yom Kippur is the end and the seal of Rosh Hashanah. With the Spiegel Tzichoich up in Halacha. And this also has a reflection, this idea that Yom Kippur is also Rosh Hashanah, but it's the seal, it's also mirrored in Halacha. Yom Kippur werd angerufen Rosh Hashanah euch der Fahr. Why do we call Yom Kippur Rosh Hashanah? Also for the reason was there is Rosh Hashanah liYovos. He is the Rosh Hashanah. We start counting. The Yovos is 50-year cycle. Is the new year is Rosh Hashanah. As we'll see on Yovel, also we have the slaves going free. And exactly when do they go free? So over here we're saying for Yovelos, it's Yom Kippur. Under din is, so what happens to the halach is like this. As the Yitzia for Navodim Lecheres B'Yovel, that when do the slaves go out to freedom on Yovel, is in an Eifon, this is the way it takes place. So it goes gradually. Starting from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, the slaves would not leave to their homes, they would not leave their masters yet. But also they would not continue to be enslaved to the masters. So they were not working, but they didn't get to go home yet. But once Yom Kippur came, then the servants were free to go to their homes. So the completion of their freedom took place on Yom Kippur. This is quoting from the Rambam and the Gemara. Zetman in them zwei nekudes. So we see from this 2 points. The inyan hayitzi lecherus is a nekuda. The fact that they're going out to freedom, that's 1 point. Both on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it is what? They're going out to freedom. They're no longer going to be slaves. But on the other hand, is the nekuda gufa eingeteilt in zwei zmanim. This point of freedom has been divided into 2 times. The beginning of the leaving their masters, which is the part that they no longer enslave them, is in Rosh Hashanah. That takes place on Rosh Hashanah. The Gamar HaYitzia, and the conclusion of this exodus of leaving their master, Niftarim Levateim, that they can go back to their homes. But those is the Iker. That's the main, that you're no longer there. You no longer have to stay with your master. Is B'Yom Kippurim, that takes place in Yom Kippur. So now we see these 2 points also as they're reflected, as we have Nitzavim and Vayeilech, the 2 ideas, as it's reflected in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the 2 points within Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And now we will further explain, the Rebbe will further explain how Rosh Hashanah is connected to the Parshas Nitzavim and Vayeilech, to the theme of Nitzavim and Vayeilech together, and then how more detailed Nitzavim and Vayeilech are separated, and Vayeilech has a connection to Yom Kippur. Gimel, the Shayches von Atem Nitzavim Hayom Gomer to Rosh Hashanah. What is the connection of the portion Nitzavim to Rosh Hashanah? As the Rebbe quoted earlier, that we always read Atem Nitzavim before Rosh Hashanah. Is that Alter Rebbe Mevayer? The Alter Rebbe explains. Rosh Hashanah is the Zman from Tam Lichuni Aleichem. Rosh Hashanah time is that we make Hashem a king over us. we crown Hashem. How do we accomplish that by that by the Yidden there should be a Melech, that Hashem should become the king of Yeshurun, the king of the Yidden, der tam lichuni aleichem, that you make me a king over you. So that takes place as the Pasuk says, Vahi b'shurun Melech, bis asif roshei when there is the gathering of the people, the heads of the people. When kulam is achvim yachad, the Alter Rebbe, look at the Torah, that when all gather together, liyos lachodim ke'echad, to be united like one. That's the way we bring the crowning. That's the way we perform the crowning of Hashem, throughout the union, the united of all Yidden. We gather all together. But this is the inyan ha'achdus von Yidden. That's the idea of the unity of Yidden. Das ist der Teichen Kloli von Atem Nitzovim Hayom Kulchem Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem Rashechem Shivteichem V'goyim Hashem Mecha. This is the general theme of the Atem Nitzovim Hayom Kulchem Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem that we read in Parshas Nitzovim. Everybody together, that notwithstanding, notwithstanding the difference of levels for Zainam Faran by Yidden that exists by Yidden, stay ze over Kulchem, they are all yet together. Als vi eitz, all like one lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, before Hashem your God. Dalet. So this is the opening and the theme of the Parshas Nitzavim. Now, if you examine the mitzvahs of the Sedra of the Parshas Nitzavim, the mitzvahs from the Sedra Hakil Sefer Torah, that you should gather the people at the end of the 7th year after Shemitah. You gather together, gather Noshim V'Taf, and also the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. These two mitzvahs, these are such a type of mitzvahs, but in Zay is Mudgish, the Agdos from Yidden. In these mitzvahs, it's emphasized the unity of the Yidden. Explains. The mitzvah from Hakil Esahom, the mitzvah to gather the people, Nemtarum alle Yidden gleich on Unterschied. It encompasses all Jews equally, without any distinction. Ba'anoshim, ba'ataf. The Pasuk says the men, the women, the little children, the gerchel goyim, the convert. Was azah achdus gefindt man it by kein ander mitzvah. This is a unity that we don't find any other mitzvah. So this is the mitzvah that it is talked about in the Parshas Nitzavim. When the Farbert is angerufen Hakil, that's why we actually call it Hakil, gathered together, because the idea of the word, the concept, Balder Musaf and Kohol, the concept of the word, of the idea of Kohol, Badait, it means as the Farzamut Zainen, that those who are gathered are not just gathered in one place. It's not just a combination of many details, but you combine them that they become one new entity, a Hakil entity, but rather they're united in one new entity. Now there is a kohol. Now it became a kohol. This idea of Hakil. And there meet werd verantwortet dat mir in einem Inyan von Hakil. But this also explains to us something which is surprising about Hakil. Now that we're saying that Hakil's concept that encompasses everything will explain to us the surprise. Why would the Torah reading be done through the king versus through the head of the Beis Din? Because we're talking about Torah, but since we're explaining that this has to do with the idea of uniting the people takes place through the king, who is the king over all. But the reading of the Torah of Zayin Durchun Melech, who reads from the Torah during Hakil is the king. It would seem that learning Torah with alle Eden is a zach was shayich to Sanhedrin. Who does it belong to teach Torah to all the Eden? Seems like it would belong to the High Court. Or the Kriya B'Torah B'Hakel Gedav Zayin, the Kriya, the reading of Torah B'Hakel should have been Durchun Rosh HaSanhedrin, either through the head of the court or the Durchun Av Bezdin or the main of the Bezdin, the Sanhedrin, the Av Bezdin, not the beer in them. But what is the explanation? In Torah Zayin and Dot Sveinyon, Torah has two parts. Aleph Limud HaTorah, we have the study of Torah, which is Negeya, that Inyan Ha'avon V'Asogin, where it's important for people to understand and grasp. That's the study of Torah. But in them, there is differences between those that are the head and those that are the tribes. On the other and the other category, until the ones that throw the water. So there's simple people that are not well versed in the study, and there is more accomplished people. So there's differences. That's when we talk about the study of Torah. But then there is base Kriya B'Torah, just to read in the Torah. Because Kriya B'Torah, when we talk about reading in the Torah, in Torah Shebiksav, when we're talking about the written Torah, over there is nit verbunden dafke mit Avon Vasoga. It's not connected with understanding grasp. You don't have to understand the Torah Shebiksav. Nor dos is shaykh tzali in b'shava on ken chilukim. This belongs to all Yidden equally, without any distinction. And this is like by Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebiksav, you need Havana Vasoga, but in reading in Torah Shebiksav, just reading the words, there is that concept which all Yidden are equal in reading it. You don't have to understand it. About as by Hakil. Since by Hakil all Jews are united and they become one entity, is verstandig, it's understood that Demult is Negeya, der Inyan in Torah, Demult, that's when it's important, this concept in Torah, in Belchunas Gleichen Zechois alle Yidden, in which all Yidden are equal, which is Kriya in Torah Shebiksav. We're reading in the Torah Shebiksav, which all Yidden are the same. Unochmer, and even more than just that, saying that this is reading Torah Shebiksav, L'shoina Rambam, as the Rambam uses the language, says it's like the same as the day that it was given on Sinai. So it's such a kind of a reading of the Torah in Hakil like it was given in Sinai. What happened at Sinai? Was Maimed Har Sinai the standing of Har Sinai encompasses all Yidden on an equal level. And therefore, the Yira Atzmai, so he should see himself, he should visualize himself as if he was just now commanded and he's hearing it from Hashem. Und der Inyan in Torah is shaykh zum Melech Davke. This aspect of Torah that combining everybody and reading from the part which all Yidden are combined, Torah Shebiksav, that relates specifically to the king. From the Unterworfenkeit from the ganzen Volk to Melech, because the subjugation of the entire people to the king is nit mitzad havona v'hasoga. It's not because of their understanding and grasping. That's why they are subjugate themselves to the king. Nor is their etzem mitzias, just that it's their essence of who they are, their existence. Und alles was they haben, everything that they have, whatever they own, Geherim zu Melech, belong to king. Because the Riber is a Ma'ached und a Metzias, that's why he unites them into one entity. At his Leiv Kol Kal Yisrael, he becomes the heart of all the Jewish people. That's the king. The king, as it's quoted, is the Leiv Kol Kal Yisrael from the Rambam Hilchos Melachim. Umahai Taima, that is the reason. For this reason is there was his koida b'Torah. So it's he who reads in the Torah. Tut oiv by Eden dem Indian in Torah. He accomplishes by the Yidden this idea in Torah was his hecher von hasoge, which is higher than grasping. Is b'shove by ganz Kal Yisrael. It's equal by Kal Yisrael. So this is going back to the one mitzvah, the mitzvah of Hakil, which is a mitzvah in this parsha, which represents this greatest level of unity, and it actually, that's why it's done through the king versus the Bezdin or the Hereshus and Hedrin, because the idea of this mitzvah is the level of unity in a way where their whole existence is united, and it's not in a way a level of Torah understanding and logic, which is the limudat Torah, which may make differences. Here, the idea is unity, and that's why it's done for the king. Euch die zweite mitzvah from Parshas Vayeilech. Also, the second mitzvah of Parshas Vayeilech is nitkin inyan from limudat Torah. It's not the concept of study Torah, nor ksivas sefer Torah. We're talking about writing. It's just a level of writing. But this is madgish od the shayches from Eden to Torah. That emphasizes this connection for Eden with Torah. Was is ba'ala gleich, which is equal by everyone. Al derech hanal, similar benegay to Kiris Torah b'Hakel. We've said before, with regards to reading Torah b'Hakel, the writing of the Torah is just a simple. Not the study emphasizes the fact that we're all together. So basically, we're just saying that mitzvahim and the mitzvahs are the level of unity. So I say the Rebbe is going to explain about Vayeilech. The chiluk so vision mitzvahim and Vayeilech in the unity of Yidden. Was das is a Teuchen Kanal, which is the contents of the parsha. That sein Muvan Leuten Unterschied, we will understand this by the difference between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as it differs between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the inyan von Tamlichuni Aleichem, and the concept "make me a king over you," how it is with regards to Rosh Hashanah and how Yom Kippur. Vidermont, as mentioned, Zayin and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur ein nekuda. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are 1 point. The Tamlichuni Aleichem, this making Hashem a king over you, from the Rosh Hashanah, this is accomplished in the duration of the 10 days of Teshuvah, until its completion and wholesomeness on Yom Kippur. Und the Far sagt man, Hamelech HaKodesh Allah Seres Yemei Tshuva. We say Hamelech HaKodesh, crowning the king during the entire 10 days of Tshuva. Nor the Chelek Tzuz is. So what is the difference between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur? Rosh Hashanah wird aufgetan der Tamlichuni Aleichem in Shoresh U'Mokir Harishon. Rosh Hashanah, the king over you, is accomplished in the root and the very first source, meaning above. Damut is mem'oirer. Then we arouse them tainuk v'rotzin von atzmusi yisbarech, the light and the will of the blessed essence of Hashem in Melucha, that he wants to be in kingdom. Yidden accomplished that. Und Yidden haben bekoich zu peil sein. Thus, how do we have, Yidden do have the power to cause, affect this. How the farva ze seinen mushrish in atzmus is because the Yidden are rooted in atzmus. And in the Aseres he made Shuva, and during the 10 days of Shuva, werd l'shoina Kabbalah. So then, in the language of Kabbalah, Evgiton, der binyan for Sfiras HaMalchus, then it is accomplished that building of the Sfiras HaMalchus. The Rotzen takes place on the Rosh Hashanah, the Tainug and Rotzen, and the building of the Malchus takes place during the Aseres Yemei Shuva. Bis Yom Kippur, until Yom Kippur, when the binyan HaMalchus is Bishleimusei, the building of Hashem's kingdom is complete in its completion, wholesomeness. That inyan for Tamlichuni Aleichem, so then the idea of Tamlichuni Aleichem is that Meir Begil Lamata. It shines in the revealed way below. So the Baal does their Tamlichuni Aleichem is man poil bisasiv Roshiyom, since the Tamlichuni Aleichem is accomplished through gathering all the people, durch Achdus von Yidden, which means the unity of Yidden, is verstandig, so it's understood as behesem zum Chiluk Hanal zwischen Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur b'negei Tamlichuni Aleichem, that fitting with this above distinction, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, as far as Tamlichuni Aleichem, that Rosh Hashanah does it in the Shoresh U'Mokir, and it comes out below manifests itself in actual Lamata Begilu. Yom Kippur. So similarly, there's also that distinction, how the unity of all Yidden accomplishes Rosh Hashanah, the Tamluchuni Aleichem in the Shoresh, and the unity of Yidden Yom Kippur, and they accomplish that Shikad Lamata. The Achdus from alle Yidden in Rosh Hashanah, the unity of all Yidden in Rosh Hashanah, is Be'ikar Bezer Achdus is Lamaila. It's mainly how they're united, how they're one is above in Shoresh Mokir, in the root and the source. When Yom Kippur wird auch this Achdus, this Gala Lamata, and Yom Kippur, that union, that oneness is revealed below. Und das ist der Ilu Shalei Be'erech für Yom Kippur legabe the Milu for Rosh Hashanah. This is the great elevation, which cannot even be compared, so much greater from Yom Kippur legabe the Ilu for Rosh Hashanah relative to the advantage and the greatness of Rosh Hashanah. The Achdus von allen Neshamas Yisrael in Zeir Shodesh Mokir, this oneness, the union of all Neshamas Yisrael in their root and source, is nicht bederech chidush gomur and oiftu. It's not in a style, not a way that it's a novelty. It's not completely novel, and it's not an accomplishment. It's not something new, nor val dorten. Is l'chatchila nitokin ort oif pirud v'chiluki dargis. Over there in the root, to begin with, there is no room for separation and these differences of levels. Over there, it's like a circle. There is no top and there's no beginning and there's no end. It's a circle. The emissar oiftu von Achdus, when the real, true accomplishment of unity, of Achdus, of one, is macht from pirud Achdus, is when you turn and you make from separation into one. When you accomplish unity, dort was over there where there are different levels that are separated. Und davke di Achdus from pirud, specifically this union that unites that separation, direkt ois the emesa Achdus pshuta de l'mayla. This expresses the true, simple union of above, that which is accomplished when you bring pieces that are separated together. For davke von Achdus abshuta, because it's only from the simple level of Achdus nemtzich der koyach. From there you can take the strength to machon dem reshus harabim areshus hayochid, to make the reshus harabim into a private domain, which means taking from the pirud li chidoy shalaylam, bring him and make him a private domain from a public domain, from pirud into yichidoy shalaylam, to the one of Hashem. But other chiluk hanal in der Achdus von Eden zwischen Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, this distinction of above, that the difference in the union of Yidden, way it is on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, spiegelt sich up, this mirrors, it reflects itself in the mechiluk zwischen zei b'shayches to minyan hatshuva, on the difference between as Rosh Hashanah, as it relates to Teshuvah. Rosh Hashanah zok menit kein viduyim. On Rosh Hashanah you don't say confessions, creates a very similar. In the tefillahs v'chula, in the prayers for Rosh Hashanah, verdit der mont, we don't mention that a vidui in a way of confession. There is some mention, but there is not in a way of confession. And nit wegen chatoyim, we don't talk about sins, and afila nit wegen der slicha v'kapora. We don't talk about forgiving and atonement. Mashenkin Yom Kippur, as opposed to Yom Kippur, is there Yom HaSlicha v'Kapara. That is the day of forgiveness and atonement. We say confession, etc. So we can explain the reason for this difference. Possibly we can explain. The avodah for Rosh Hashanah, the service of Rosh Hashanah is the hazozeh mitzad etzem haneshama. There, that's the move, the change that takes place, the impact from the essence of the soul. This is mushrish in atzmus as it's rooted in atzmus. Noch hecher for sheirish Torah mitzvahs, which is even higher than the root from Torah mitzvahs. There is the etzem haneshama of a yid is even in a higher place. Umitzader madrege, and when you look from the perspective of that level where Yidnar is lechatchila talking or farchatoim. Over there is no room for sins. It's beyond sins. Sins come from the Torah mitzvahs. If you violate, don't violate. This is beyond. The river is done euch nit shayach zu reden wegen slicha v'kapora. That's why it doesn't apply to discuss about forgiveness, atonement. Afilu nit wegen dem ilui. We're not even going to discuss the advantage from Zedonis Nasalek in which the intentional sins turn into merits through tshuva. Sees demul de bechira chofshis for atzmas in Neshamas Yisrael. On Rosh Hashanah, then there is that free choice that Hashem makes of the essence of Hashem, choosing the Neshamas Yisrael and choosing the Jewish soul. Was mitzad them because of that, it is aroused, brings about that the light and the will of make me a king over you. That's Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur, over Verter Shoyrish Ve'etzem HaNeshama is Gal Lamata. Yom Kippur, the root of the souls becomes revealed below in them Ord in the place where there is applicable sin. Und dorten is der Itzume shel Yom Kippur mechaper. But there, the day of Yom Kippur atones. It's sad that his kashrus from Etzem HaNeshama in Elikus, because of the tie of the essence of the soul and godliness, is Gala Yom Kippur, which is revealed in Yom Kippur. This accomplished the atonement and forgiveness for the sin. So basically, over here, it comes down to the level where there is pirud, where there is sins, and over there, we accomplish the kapara still on the sin. Does git oicha hasbara v'amtoke? This actually also adds explanation and sweetens the idea of asdavke in Leil Yom Kippurim Noigim, that it's specifically in the light of the Kippur, the custom is shekoidem shem mispalalim latirim lechol habaryonim, that before you daven, you allow that all the sinners to participate, be part of the davening. Why don't we do this on Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah kann man sich aufheben hecher von dem Ort, wo Avaryonim und Averes Rizunon. On Rosh Hashanah, you can rise and higher above from the place where sinners and sins can touch. It says, Ober damot nitshayach der inyan, but then you can't have this idea, you should daven with them. That we should be able to unite and connect with them in their shape, the way they are below as sinners, can't combine with them. Davke Yom Kippur, specifically Yom Kippur, then we come to the real, true way of from the Yasu Kulam Aguda Echos, they'll all make one group as a feel that even Jews, these days I know they're violent them from Avaryonim, that the way they are still in that form that they are in the shape of sinners, they unite with all the Yidden. This mispalel in Mohem, Baguda Achas, we daven together with them in one group, in one binding, we're all together. Even with Avaryonim. That's the accomplishment of Yom Kippur. Zayit. B'tzadem was the Ardus of Yom Kippur v'et nimshach in Eden v'zizayin lamata. Because of this, that the unity of Yom Kippur extends to the Eden as they are below. wird sie darüber ausgedrückt, nicht nur in Yone Haneshama. That's why it expresses itself not in matters of the soul, nor euch in Yone Haguf, but also in matters that impact the body. In the Chamisha Inuyim from Yom Kippur, in the 5 afflictions that we are afflict ourselves during Yom Kippur, is in the talking Chelek zwischen ein Eden mit dem Zweiten. There is no difference between one Jew and another. In Akiyum Mitzvah Chiyuvis, when fulfilling a positive mitzvah, unan inyan from Pula Vasiya, and when you do an act, doing something, Zainadochi Lukim and the Meif Vedagras Hakiyum, there is differences in the level and the way that is performed zwischen tzaddikim gedolim, between great tzaddikim, und anoshim pshutim, and simple people. But in an inyan von inui v'shvisa, but when we talk about a matter which is affliction and resting and not doing, is doch in them neat, when you're talking about not to do, in them header, what we're not, they're talking unterschied, there's no not to do the 5 inuyim, and what we don't do, there is no difference. Kein Unterschied zwischen ein Yid not Zweiten, between one Yid and another Yid. Also in the inner matter of things. Der lechayosom barov, to vitalize them, give them light, give them life, even of hunger. But as the translation in Chassidus, lechayosom barov, that the chayis comes from the Rav. Chayosom barov, the chayis was kommt from the Rav Gufa. This chayis that comes from the hunger itself is by Alam and B'Shaveh. Everybody gets that result, the spiritual chayis, from the Rav equally. As opposed to Surah Shoshana, Choch as David Gufa is mitzadetzim hameshama, even though that service is from the essence of the soul, was his hecher from his chalkos, which is higher than separation, is thus ober nor b'shas der aveda tefillah chulu gufa. It's only at the time of the service when you daven itself, aber acharat tefillah, but after the davening, when we get avek from the aveda, when you leave, you go away, you walk away from the avodah of the davening, for the avodah mufanemtzach mit ichlu mashmanim ushtum amtakim, but the other part of the Rosh Hashanah, which is eat fatty foods and drink sweets, is the achila u'shtiya bayedin b'efen achar. So then the eating and drinking is by each one differently. Ches. This is the oich that ilu shaloi be'erech in Parshas Vayeilech l'gabe Parshas Nitzavim. This is also in a non-comparable way that the Parsha Vayeilech is greater than the Parsha of Nitzavim. In Parshas Nitzavim, Retzich wegen der Achdus von alle Yidden. The portion of Nitzavim talks about the unity of all Yidden, from the Roshechem, Shiftechem, the leaders to the tribes, until the woodchopper and the water drawer. As it comes at that time, because at that time they're nitzavim gomer lifnei Hashem Elokecha. They're standing before Hashem your God. But this means as kulam misalim l'mayla b'mekor chotzvam, they are all elevated above in the root where they were carved out lifnei Hashem Elokecha. Parshat Vayeilech oberet, but the portion of Vayeilech speaks back in the Achdus about the unity of his event nisgala by Yidden Lamata, as it's revealed by Yidden below. V'zishtei midargosam heim, as they stand in their level. This is kavanas hakosuf. This is the intention of the pasuk. Vayeilech Moshe vaydaber gomer kol Yisrael. Moshe goes and he speaks to Kol Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu b'madrei kosei. Moshe Rabbeinu in his level is gigangen. He went. Unimshach geworden. He was drawn down by daber. Vayeilech Moshe, he went by daber. So alle Eden, they spoke to him, Zeh Stein in Zeir Madregim. as they are in their level. But on the other hand, while Moshe Rabbeinu goes down to them their level, it's the same going, the same extending, the same to Kol Yisrael. Vayeilech Moshe vaydaber el Kol Yisrael, b'shava equal. This is the chibur von etzem haneshama lemayla mid haneshama v'ziz lemata. That is the connection of the essence of the soul, the way it's above, with the soul, the way it's below. Derech zeh says an inyan von Hakel. Similarly, it's by the idea of Hakel. Von ein Zayt zogen Chazal, as anoshim boim lilmed noshim bois lishmoya. They say that the women come, the men come to listen, to learn, the women come to listen. And why did taf? What do they come for? To the Hakel to give reward for those who brought them. Because those vice that points as the actors from Hakel, that this unity of Hakel is an anoifen, is in such a way was gitan or tzuchiluke dargis. It leaves room for differences of levels. Not with the actors of Rishon, not as the unity of Rishon. But on the other hand, is dafke in them oifum von Hakel milchelukes dargis anal. It's specifically in that type of Hakel, with these differences, is hamelech oimed v'koida. Over there, the king goes and reads the kriyas ha'toira durch melech. Was nemt darum gams kol Yisrael b'shava. It takes them all through equally. So there is still differences, and yet the king unites them all. Kenal siftalet. We are calling and drawing down the simple unity from all in the call in the Mort von Chaluki Dargis, in the place where there is differences of levels. There is Messiah in the Sedra, as he concludes by Daber Moshe Bosne called Kal Yisrael Gemer Atumam, that he speaks in the ears of all the ism till the end. But the Pirush Apunum in them is, what is the inner meaning at tumam? Not only the end is ad tumam till completion, wholesomeness, is Moloshon, timimus v'shleimus, completeness and wholesomeness from Eden. That Dibur Moshe ba'ozne kol Kal Yisrael, that the speech of Moshe to the ozne kol to the Kal Yisrael is not nor to the etzem haneshama l'mayla. It's not to the etzem the shama above. But it comes to Arop and Poil, Tmimus Ushleimus, is that a Kirchsagaloim, but it accomplishes wholesomeness and completeness in the revealed part, Biz in Ale Vorim Vigidim, in all limbs and all sinews of the person. Test. So, what is the lesson from the all the above in actuality? That said is, you made Tshuva Zainen Azman, the 10 days of Tshuva are a time, Mesugel, the special opportune time to Moshe Zayin in Avos Yisrael, to add in the love of thy fellow Yisrael Jew. B'shas there is Asiv Rosh's is nit b'shleimus, when the gathering of the people Rosh Yom is not in a wholesome way, is felt in their achdus with Aliyin. There's lacking the union with all Yidden. In Vos Varamasses is all known in Zayin, Zayin. In any situation he is, if you're lacking connecting with all Yidden, not looking, notwithstanding the situation that Yid maybe is, main does need nor as is faulty in abrat. That means not only that he's lacking a detail, but this is negayet some closing and inyan for tablachuni aleichem. But this touches, this affects the general concept of make me a king over you. If God's Klal Yisrael of the entire Jewish community, since we got to prepare ourselves for Yom Kippur, darf the Avetz Jeden Eden sein. So the love to every Jew should be nit nor in a neuf, should not be in such a way as if our cooked Yenem Zra, that you look away and you don't see the other ones, the bad of the other person, as a zet lechatchila. But it has to be in a way that you don't see bad. It's not that you look away from it, but you don't even see it. As a zet lechatchila nor dem tev shaboy. He only sees the good in the other person. Und der Far hotter an Avet zu him, and that's why he has a love to him. und is sich misachet mit him and unites with him. So, in other words, so not just because you look away and you see, and therefore you only see the good. That's what you unite. Nor afilu when there's that demrabayena. But even when you see the bad that the other one has, weister from deswegen aris and avatzim, still you show him a love. Onachesh, without any consideration, no accounting. Because the Ave direkt sich ois in a that expresses itself in a great occupation, a lot of efforts to help from Yenem, to help the other person get rid and nullify of his Ra. That is Askas in Mifza Avos Yisrael, and by this occupation, in this campaign of loving the Yid in the tag in these days, is when Zoiche, you merit to Tamlichuni Aleichem Begoli, make me a king over you openly, Ma'ota Chasima, Ogmar Chasima Toiv Yom Kippurim, sealed and a complete good seal on Yom Kippur, Shana Toiv Mesuka, a good and a sweet year, Begashmis Uberuchnis, physically and spiritually, Betoiv Hanir Vanigla, and good that is revealed, that is apparent, seen, and revealed. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Vayeilech Tov Shin Lamed Beis.